Hey guys, today's video is another episode in our How to Make Your Own Movie series, and it is all about screenwriting structure as well as the development stage. Ready? Let's do this. So here's a few quick tips and just little tricks and things that are helpful when it comes to writing your screenplay. Note cards. Note cards are so helpful. Basically, you want to use these note cards and go through your outline and put different scenes and different moments that happen in your scenes on the different note cards. And then you can find an empty space in your house and just lay all of these note cards out on your floor in order, and then you can get a really nice visualization of the flow of your screenplay. And if something seems congested or if something seems really slow and dry at a certain point, you can sort of shuffle those note cards around and move them into a better pattern that makes the most sense for your movie. I kind of already mentioned this, but just try to avoid cliches. Create setups and payoffs. So these are moments that are set up in the beginning of the film that then pay off later in the movie. And one good example of this is something in screenwriting that we call Chekhov's gun. And so this simply means that if we're watching a movie and at some point in the beginning of the film we're shown a gun, it has to be for a reason. We can't just be shown a gun and then that gun just never shows up again. No, if we're shown a gun, then the gun has to go off at the end of the movie. That's the way movies work. So you want to create your setups and your payoffs, and you want to do multiple, you don't just want to do one, and you want to create them so that they really mean something. They're not just there, for the sake of needing setups and payoffs. Really make them mean something to your characters and to your story. For characters, one strategy that I like to use is I go to baby name websites and I basically look up different words that I would use to describe the character, and then I look up names that mean those words. And then I try to pick a name that metaphorically means something to my characters. And I think I've done that in most of my projects. It's definitely not necessary, but you can still just go to the baby naming website to find cool, unique names. If you're not necessarily wanting every single name to mean something, it's still a really cool resource just to give you options other than the basics like Sarah and David and Jessica and Michael and, names that are overused. Make sure you're giving your characters arcs, and they don't have to be crazy arcs because people can change, but the change doesn't have to be super significant. It can still be minor change to show change. And when I say give your characters arcs, I don't just mean your protagonists. Give your antagonists arcs. Give your villains arcs. Have your villains start at a certain place and end at a certain place. The perfect example of a villain having an arc is Thanos in the MCU. If you are not familiar with the MCU, Thanos is a huge villain that really dominated the space of the first few phases of the MCU. Essentially, the movie Infinity War is his film. We are focused on his story as an antagonist and his history and his reasonings for doing the bad that he's doing. And we get to see how he starts the film, how he ends the film, and we really get an idea of his journey and his thought process. And they just do an amazing job at making him an incredibly multi-dimensional character as opposed to just a surface level villain. You should have 2 or 3 different main objectives for each of your characters, and each scene should inform those objectives and should push that story forward. And every decision that your character makes, every move your character makes moving forward, it should fall back on those main directives, and it should be for those specific reasons, and they should have main drives. As humans, we have main drives, we have main passions. For me, my drive and my passion is film, and it's making movies and telling stories and creating. And for other people, it's teaching. For other people, it's helping people like doctors. So everyone in the world has, and even if you don't realize what yours is, Everyone in the world has some prime directive or some passion, and your characters should too, because they're real, they're human, they're people. So they should have these souls, these elements to them that make them human and make them real. And so just keep that in mind and really flesh them out as people. Give them hopes and give them dreams. Let them live and experience things and be. Try to keep your story in the present day. I definitely did not do that with my movie Bound, and it added a lot to my budget. Honestly, I spent a lot of money on the props. I had to rent a ton of costumes from a costume shop. I had to do all these different things that I never would have had to do if I had just kept my story in present day. So don't set your movie in the past or the future unless you have the means to do so. And in addition to that, try to keep your special effects to a minimum. Unless that's something that you're really, really good at and you know you can personally pull that off, try to keep the effects, the pyrotechnics, even special effects makeup. I enjoy doing those things, but I also know from personal experience that it adds time and it adds money to your budget. You have to buy supplies, and then you have to account for the time to apply that thing, and you have to keep in mind that you might need multiple versions of it depending on how long your shoot is, and there's just a lot that goes into it. So if you want to keep things simplified, then don't overcomplicate it. And I touched a little bit on length in the very beginning of this, but try to keep it under 30 minutes if it's a short, and try to keep it around 90 minutes if it's a feature. So especially if you're doing your very first feature, hopefully if you are at that point where you're doing your first feature, you have plenty of shorts under your belt and you are at an established point where you're ready to make your first feature. If you're not ready to make a feature film, then don't make a feature film. Start small, please. A lot of people get hung up in the writing of the first draft, and they get to a certain point and then they start changing things and going back and fixing things, and I'll just tell you right now, don't do that. It doesn't matter if it's bad, it just needs to be finished. Get from point A to point B and then go back and start the rewrite process, because that's when you can start breaking things up and changing things and fixing things. But if you get lost in this cycle of fixing things and changing things before you're done, you'll never be finished. You'll never hit that finish line because you're always going to be adjusting it and trying to make it perfect, and it's never going to be. I can promise you that. It will never be perfect. And I'm realizing that, and you have to be okay with that. You have to just keep moving forward with what you have in front of you and make it as good as possible. And all you can do is make your current project better than your previous project. Has nothing to do with anyone else, only you and your own work. And all you can do is just keep improving and make every single project that you create the best project you've ever created. That's the only way to keep going up. So after you finish your first draft, you honestly just want to set it aside for like an entire week. You don't want to look at that thing. Put it down, walk away. If you are a writer, then you know that constantly looking at your own work is not going to do you any favors. It's not going to help you improve it in any way. It's not productive or constructive. So yeah, just set it aside and then revisit it with fresh eyes when you're ready. Definitely try to cut out as much as possible. You want it to be as concise as possible, because with my movie Ragdoll, like I said, it's like 40 some minutes, but I guarantee you if I did a re-edit, like if I re-edited Ragdoll today, I could probably get it down to 30 minutes easy, if not less. And every moment that's in your film should be pushing your story forward. If it's not, get rid of it. If it's not servicing your plot and doing something for your audience, you don't need it. Get rid of it. Don't feel like it's necessary just because you love it. And if you do love it that much, but you still know that it's not gonna work for this movie, set it aside for another project. Maybe that character or maybe that moment can be reused, resurfaced in something different, but just not this one, because it's in the way, so kill it. All right, it's written. It's finally written. And when I say written, I mean it is also rewritten. It is done. It is done. It is locked, and it is approved, and it is ready for production. Well, what do we do now? I already mentioned copywriting and registering your script, so that is something that you want to do. So after you've thoroughly protected yourself, it's time to decide what we're doing with this movie. Are we keeping it for ourselves and producing it and making our movie ourselves, or are we optioning the screenplay, selling it to another studio or another director or another production company and making some money off of this screenplay? What is the plan? One big thing that you really need to focus on after writing your screenplay is your budget. That's actually the first step in the pre-production process, but it is a well-known fact that to make a movie you do need money. So whether it is $30 from your own checking account, or whether it is $500 from a family member, or whether it is $5,000 from a crowdfunding website, you have the power to raise that money, and we're gonna go over it in a future video. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you learned something new about the screenwriting process as well as the development stage in general. Go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications so that you know exactly what's happening and when. And have a great day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye guys.
After reconstructive surgery, he soon realizes that he smells something that stinks. That is brilliant!